Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome all councillors, officers and members of the public viewing on YouTube to this meeting of the Corporate Policy Development and Scrutiny Panel. My name's Councillor Paul Myers and I'm Chairman of the panel. I'll now call out the names of the other members of the panel and ask them please to confirm that they're present. Councillor Dogood.
Present.
Councillor Elliott.
Present.
Councillor Hughes.
Present.
Councillor Hodge.
Present.
Councillor McPhee.
Present.
Councillor Furs. Okay, I believe there's a substitute, yeah?
Yes.
Councillor Kumar, yes?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Councillor Singleton.
Present.
Councillor Warrington.
Present.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Also present are a number of officers who will be introduced as we make our way through the agenda. Can I remind members and officers to try and keep background noise to a minimum, to only speak one person at a time and not to speak above others. Please can you mute your microphones when not speaking and then unmute when I invite you to speak. Please indicate if you wish to speak by using the chat facility on Zoom by typing MIS, may I speak? And I will call each of you to speak in turn. And today, because I don't easily have visibility of the chat function, Councillor Dogood is going to assist me in this element of my role. Thank you in advance, Winston. Perda, there's a note on this. We're now in the pre-election period for the WECA and the PCC, that's the West of England Combined Authority and the Police and Crime Commissioner elections. Panel members should avoid making reference to anything which appears designed to affect support for any political party or that relate to politically sensitive issues. Does anybody have any questions before we continue with the meeting? Okay, and I'm assuming, Winston, that is no questions in the MIS.
No questions.
Thank you. Item 2 on the agenda is apologies for absence and substitutions. The Democratic Services Officer will give details of any apologies for absence and substitutions. Can you please do this, Michaela?
Yeah, we've had apologies from Councillor Andy Furs, who's been substituted by Councillor Dr. Kumar.
Thank you very much for that. And item 3 then, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? And Winston, is there any in the chat?
No, there's none in the chat, Chair.
If anybody realises as we progress through the meeting that an issue comes up or an issue where you need to declare interest, please draw my attention to this as Chair in the chat function. Item 4 is urgent business agreed by the Chair, and I can confirm that there is no urgent business. Item 5, public councillor statements. Again, I can confirm that there are no registered speakers today. Item 6 takes us to the minutes of our meeting of the 1st of February 2021. The minutes have been circulated. Could I please have a proposer and a seconder that these are a correct record of the meeting?
Councillor Myers, could I just point out, actually, the minutes attached are for the 8th of February, the call-in meeting. My mistake. I will circulate the 1st of Feb minutes at a later date, but just to confirm that you're looking at the 8th of February meeting.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you for clarifying that before we went too far. So did I see Councillor Singleton proposing? No.
You did, but I'd actually put an MIS in the chat box as well, if I could put an MIS in.
Oh, as well. Okay. If I want to speak on the minutes.
Yes, I do. It was just a thing that struck me reading them through, that the minutes very correctly call everyone Councillor X or Councillor Y, but visiting speakers are called by their first names. And that struck me as being, in one or two cases, rather more informal than perhaps minutes would have. But if it's a stylistic thing, I accept it's normal. It just slightly surprised me reading it through.
Okay. Well, unless you want to comment now, Michaela, could I suggest we take this away and we'll discuss whether we actually are a little bit more formal with public speakers and officers' names, yes?
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Somebody's mentioned my sound is not very loud, so I've increased it as far as I can on my own volume. Is that any better?
Yeah, I don't think it's you, Chair. I think Hal's volume was a bit low. I think you're fine. You're coming across fine.
Okay, I'm probably a bit loud. Okay, right, I've got chat open. Is there anybody on that basis, if you're happy, Alistair, could we propose and second these minutes are accepted? So do I have a proposer? If somebody just wants to shout out, I don't think we're going to.
Councillor McPhee wants to propose.
Okay, and a seconder?
Councillor Duguid.
Councillor Duguid. Okay, okay. If we could then have a show of hands, and Winston, you can tell me how many people have voted. That would be splendid. So if you could all put up your hand in the screen now, if you wish to vote in favour of these minutes, yeah? Been accepted.
Yes, everybody seems to be in favour. Michaela, can you confirm that?
And you have to vote, Winston. Well done.
Yes. Pleading the Fifth Amendment, yeah. Michaela?
Yes, all okay, yeah.
Okay, splendid stuff. So those minutes are then accepted as a true record. I'm now pleased to move on to item 7 and hand over to our cabinet member, Councillor Samuels, to give his update. And after the update, we'll take questions. So, Councillor Samuels, are you able to take the screen?
I am. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll take these organised finance issues, property issues, and then there is another. So I'll take them in that order. On finance, obviously the kind of peak of the workload preparing the budget has passed, but we are now turning our attention to the 22-23 financial year. The key things that we'll be looking at in the coming months, and we haven't started this work yet, we are going to undertake some work on adult social care. We are looking really at what is a very complex landscape in Bath, North East Somerset on adult social care. Members will obviously be aware that Leslie Hutchinson left the council a few weeks ago, and we have an interim manager in. Recruitment is in progress for a permanent post, but we will be working with the interim director over the next couple of months. This is a piece of work that I want to be cross-party. We want to try and get a sense of how the council is spending its money right across adult social care. I'm not looking for any particular outcomes at this stage, but what we are being told is that there is room for manoeuvre, there is room to make some changes, but it would be preempting the work to say whether that's the case or not. But as it's such a large proportion of the council's revenue budget, it seems important to do that. So there will be a review taking place. I haven't yet agreed the terms of reference for that with the Director of Finance, but it will be probably a piece of work that we'll look to take place somewhere between April and September. I can't be any more precise than that at the moment, but just wanted to flag that up. Another piece of financial work is around the outturn. Obviously, a financial year closes this week, and some of us anyway will be looking anxiously at the outturn figures to see how those come forward. If members of the committee may remember that the last report that was received by the Cabinet in February showed that the council was on track to balance its books this year, but of course, and nothing particularly appears to be dislodging that assumption. But that work will be going on in the finance team once the financial year has closed. The report on the outturn will probably not be available until June or July. The leader has been talking about having an additional cabinet meeting in June, so it's possible that that will go there, and I can obviously update this panel closer to the time. The other big, some other big things around finance are the government has announced a further fund for businesses over the last week. And this is to help non-essential retail businesses open up. So we're kind of getting ready for that, waiting for the detailed government guidance on that programme. And then we'll be swinging into action fairly quickly to make sure that money gets out to those who need it. It may be this is something the panel would like to look at some point as to how we've done with the business grants over the last year. And if that's a wish from the panel, I'm quite happy to speak to the Director of Finance about that, because I think it's been quite a task for the council. A lot of money has been put out, so it would be useful to perhaps do that. I think I did see a reference as well for some additional funds to councils, but other than what's been said by central government, there's no particular detail on that. We are imagining that if there is a further distribution of COVID-related assistance, it will be based on formulae as it has been in the past, but we'll know that as soon as we get the detail from the government. I just wanted to highlight something that's come, which we're still trying to absorb the impact of, or try to understand the impact of. Unexpectedly, the Department for Transport has cut highway maintenance spending by an amount larger than we were expecting. Well, we weren't expecting a cut, actually. And this is not just applied to Bath, North East Somerset, this applies to all councils. I probably shouldn't say any more than that, because obviously this crosses over with WECA's responsibilities, and we are working with the WECA authorities to try and understand the position. But this will have an impact on this council's highway maintenance programme. So roughly £1 million has been lost by the government's reduction in funding. So when I've got a bit more information on that, I will of course share that. Moving off from finance to property matters, the panel would be aware that we're doing quite a lot of work on property at the moment. So a few things to update. There is a new interim manager, Alan McCartney, who has been appointed to take over running of the council's property estate in the interim while we continue to review it. And he has been charged with a number of activities in terms of preparing the property service for change over the coming months. And it may be that members of the panel would like to see him at this meeting at some point. The work, the Montague Evans review of the commercial estate that I've mentioned on a number of occasions, a draft report has been received for comment, and I think we are expecting the final version to come back to us at some point shortly after Easter. And I did give a commitment to your chairman that we would have a discussion about that when we had a version that we were happy with. So that work is kind of more or less come to a conclusion with just say the final report to be received. What else did I want to highlight? This is kind of a property matter really, but it's also spills into regeneration. One of the tasks that I seem to have inherited or been allocated is the work to appoint consultants to undertake a master plan for the northern part of the retail area of the city, which of course includes much of our most valuable property stock. So tenders were issued on that a few months ago, and we are evaluating the tenders at the moment. I think we've had 3 tenderers, and officers are still discussing and firming up the basis of those tenders with the tenderers. So, but I'm hoping that we will know who that organisation is in the very near future, again, the next week or two. That will be quite an important piece of work for the city, because it will not only comment on the prospects for the retail estate in the north of the city, but it will also look at opportunities for regeneration. And I don't know, as we stand here, sit here today, what the level of voids are that we're going to inherit, but we are going to do a piece of work post the April the 12th, when non-essential retail can reopen, to try and evaluate what level of empty properties there are. It's quite difficult to tell at the moment. So we will have that information hopefully towards the end of April. So that Millstone Quarter master plan, and just to refresh members which area it covers, it's broadly from the area along the river in Walcott Street, right across to Queen Square, bounded by George Street at the north and New Bond Street at the south. So it's quite a large but important part of the city's retail and leisure area. So there are a couple of other things that I said I'd mention. One is that most members will probably know now that I authorised the final transfer of Bathampton Meadows to the National Trust. I'm very pleased with the work officers did to support that. A lot of work and a very detailed report setting out the basis for that transfer took place. And negotiations with the National Trust will now obviously continue to put that into effect. But also we have begun talking to the National Trust about the working relationship for the future, what they're going to do with the land. And members may have noticed that there is a connection here to the Bath River Line project, which is currently out for consultation, where the ambition is to create an entirely off-road walking and cycling route from Newbridge to Bath Easton. Members will know that the first part of that, from Newbridge to Bath Quays, is a more advanced part of the project, and there's a lot more work to do on the eastern section from Bath Quays right out to Bath Easton, and ultimately to connect Bath Ford and Bathampton as well. So this is quite an exciting piece of work, because it'll be possible at last to get those routes in without people having to compete with the problems of cycling and walking along London Road, which is never the most pleasant environment for anybody, even though it is in my ward. The last thing I wanted to mention was some work that came out of a complaint that the leader received, actually, in relation to council tax discounts. And I spoke to the person who complained, and we had a good talk about the problem. And what appears to be the case is that the recent premium that have been added to council tax bills for empty properties is slightly disconnected from premium or discounts that were agreed by council back in 2012. And this is no fault of the council, because these two things came together through different government legislation routes. But the case that I dealt with has highlighted a need to make sure that there is a sensible progression and flexibility for council tax officers in dealing with the owners of empty properties, where the circumstances behind those properties being empty are perfectly reasonable. So, for example, where somebody's been taken into care, or major works are being carried out, or there are disputes and so on taking place. And at the moment, officers have less discretion than they really need. And what's been highlighted to me is that it looks slightly incoherent when you put the two together. So I'm doing some work on that with officers. And if there is a need to introduce any changes, they will have to come back to council because council sets the policy. So I'm not sure we're going to, I don't know at this stage whether we will have to make some changes or recommend some changes, but it is a piece of work I'm doing. And I think it's important for the owners of empty properties that the council has, you know, a logical way of dealing with their cases. So, Chair, I think that's the all the issues I wanted to cover. I'm very happy to take questions from any member of the panel.
Chair, Councillor Warrington has a question, Chair.
Yeah, I've got chat open now. So if I could invite Councillor Warrington to ask a question, please.
Yeah, thanks for the update, Richard. I wondered if I could ask about the council tax updates, because I have a case in my ward, and it's amounting to thousands and thousands of pounds where somebody's trying to bring a property up to a habitable state. And because it was probate, it was one of the issues that I was extremely concerned about when this issue first arose, when we talked about premiums on empty properties. Do you know when that will be resolved or when it will come back to council? Because people are getting bills and they've also been told to go to government to get their properties revalued at zero. Which seems a very, very bureaucratic way of dealing with it.
Thank you, Councillor Warrington, for that question, because this is something I've encountered as well. And if you wanted to send me the details of that case, I'd be very happy to look at it. The issue is actually with the legislation. Almost immediately, if you remember the history of this, that the council introduced premium of 100 and 200% last year and 300% this year. And that relates to properties that are empty for 2 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years, and 10 years and over. Almost immediately, the first premium hit people's accounts. I started to get some inquiries from people affected. And when we looked into the detail of this, what we discovered was that when Parliament passed the regulations permitting the addition of these premia, they failed to give the power to councils to operate exemptions other than in very specific circumstances. So, for example, there are some circumstances around military personnel who obviously will come and go with properties, and those are specifically exempted. So what we have discovered, unfortunately, is that the council has no power to remove the premium. And the only way the premium can be removed is if the property is reoccupied. Now, I don't know your constituent circumstances. The case I dealt with, the only advice council tax staff could give to the owner was, well, reoccupy it as quickly as you can, and then the premium will be removed. The owner pointed out that they were in the middle of renovating property. It wasn't habitable. So that's probably goes back to the advice you've been given about void rating. The other thing, though, that we discovered when we looked into this was that in the parliamentary debates, because I actually went right back through the Hansards to look at this, we discovered there'd been no discussion about this. So I think what's happened is that it's one of these things where when a piece of secondary legislation goes through like this, if it doesn't get proper scrutiny by MPs or it hasn't been picked up by anybody, these things often go through. And I don't think, you know, I don't think it was something parliamentarians considered at the time. So it is very unfortunate. But I mean, if you do send me the details, I would be interested to see them because, you know, it helps to build the knowledge about how we can improve things better for the better. So please do send it to me, and I will have a look at it for you.
Thanks, I will do.
Okay, does anybody else want to speak?
I have a question, Chair, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Councillor Sammy, you volunteered the information on the business grants. That would be helpful. It would be helpful if we could benchmark it against perhaps North Somerset, Bristol and South Gloucestershire. I'm not mentioning the word WECA. Oh, I have mentioned the word WECA. Yes, our other combined, the other unitary authorities within that, and just how we've gone about approaching, a bit about how we've gone about approaching businesses, and the success rate of what we've done would be helpful in that report.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that in developing the policies, because some have required the use of discretion, we have worked with South Gloucestershire, Bristol and North Somerset to try and ensure that there is a consistency across the area, because what we didn't want was businesses in one area having premises in another and then discovering they were being treated differently. So there has been a consistent approach. And the reason for saying that to you is that that does mean that the data that's being collected is also consistent. So we should be able to produce a report that shows the activity within Bath North East Somerset, but also how it compares with the other councils, if that's of help.
It would be, thank you.
Okay, Karen, do you want to speak again?
Yeah, just one comment. I know one of my residents had a bit of an issue with a business grant when there was a bit of you can have it, you can't have it, you can sort of thing, and it was quite and it was a bit unfortunate because they had a health issue as well outside COVID. So it was very, very stressful and impacted more on their health. And I don't do that in any criticism in a way, because I know that you know, we've dealt with thousands of these, hundreds of thousands of pounds, and it's been a learning curve. But I think it might be good if I just feed that back. Who would be the best person to feed that back to?
Well, again, either if you route it to Andy Rothery or myself,
okay,
we will make sure that you know, proper responses are given. I mean, what I would say is that the impression many businesses have got when announcements have been made is that they will get certain sums of money and they'll get it almost immediately. But in fact, usually what happens is there's a lag between the announcement of the grants and the detailed guidance that the government has put in place behind it. And that is frustrating for businesses because they don't understand why we're not giving them money immediately. But, you know, having said that, the volume of complaints I've had over the last 12 months has been pretty low, you know, compared with the number of grants that have been issued in total. But wherever possible, we have tried to get money to every business that is eligible and try to get it to them quickly, because we realise how important this is for those businesses.
If I'm conscious of time, so if we could just follow up, I hate to cut you off, but if we could just keep moving. I just had a question on behalf of the panel, really, as chair, about the property report due to come out. And can we please liaise, Richard, with Michaela to look at how soon as appropriate we could get a meeting together for the panel overall to have a public session, and if necessary, a private element of that if there's anything confidential, yeah?
Yes, of course, you have that undertaking, yeah.
Lovely stuff. Well, look, thank you very much. If there are no more questions, I've got nothing in MIS. Just before we move on, Councillor Hughes, you raised the question about item 9 and declaring an interest. Unless there's somebody legal on the officer base here today, if Michaela perhaps would want to comment too, maybe if you could declare it and Michaela actually acknowledges that. So, and I gather from previous Zoom meetings, you need to verbalise it in order for it to be declared. So would you like this opportunity between items to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a business that's in receipt of a grant, a COVID grants.
Okay, so if you could note that, Michaela, on the basis that we are about to, on item 9, to discuss the work of Invest in Bath. For good form, does anybody else in response at this moment, having been jogged their memory by that, want to declare anything? That's not that I know any of you should, but it would just save us coming back to it. I'm not getting any MISs or noise, so I'm assuming we shall move on. So thank you very much, Councillor Samuel, for your update. We'll now move to item 8, which is the parental leave policy and handling casework, and something that came to us from a council meeting. And could I invite Officer Joe Morrison from Democratic Services as manager there to please introduce the report?
Yes, Chair. Hello. So you've got the report, and hopefully it's fairly self-explanatory. It was approved at Council last year in September 2020. And in approving it, they asked for this panel to just have a little look at how you handle casework in this situation. So you can see from the report, we've done a bit of research with other councils, and there is no sort of hard and fast process. There's no one size fits all. So we've suggested a few principles that ought to be thought about when when parental leave is requested. But really the key thing is that it does need to be personal, and it needs to be flexible depending on what the individuals want. A key principle that should be clear is, although there's no sort of one way of doing it, whatever is agreed needs to be clear to the public so they know who they're contacting and who can help them if they need some help with casework. Legally, it doesn't affect the provisions in the Local Government Act about needing to attend a meeting within 6 months. But as you know, that council can extend that. So if somebody was in that situation and they weren't going to come to a meeting, then we can take a report to council, and that covers that. And we've done that in the past for similar situations. Just before I finish, I mean, the key sort of principle that came out from talking to other councils really was that it should be supportive for the councillor, and there should be no democratic deficit for members of the public in terms of the support that they can receive. And I think that's it. Unless there's any questions, I think that's all I've got to say. Hopefully it's clear in the report. Thank you.
Okay, well, I've put an MIS as me personally, not as chair, so I'll take the liberty, and then I've got Councillor Singleton. But if I may start, I thought the report was very, very good. What I would like to see clarified is that I always believe it's very difficult unless it's clearly established on record in a single place that's accessible, who is in control stroke accountable. So whatever, I like the way that it's agreed on a case-by-case basis with the member concerned and the group leaders can know, but I would like to see a note put on the councillor contact area, say of the website, so that any residents are absolutely clear, and everybody is, who is covering, or if the person is continuing, then maybe it doesn't need changing. But I think it's absolutely vital that there's a way of recording it, because then later on, if something actually gets dropped or somebody complains, I think it's awful if somebody says, well, I thought you were doing it, and they said, well, I thought you were doing it, and things like that. So I think that's crucial. I also think in this paper, it would be good to make a reference to the fact that although you can have 2 ward members in a ward, it might be that they are not of the same political party, and that in the arrangements, I wouldn't imagine it was unusual for somebody in one political party to nominate somebody to cover for them from their party rather than the other person necessarily in the ward. And I think it would just help avoid any lack of clarity and avoid unnecessary debate down the line if it was clear that whatever is agreed in that case is what's agreed with and by the ward member. who is not available. And then, as you noted, I think although this covers really ward work, I think it will be useful in the paper if it really did spell out the point you made it about voting is not transferable under the Local Government Act, because I can imagine that question coming up down the line in years to come if this stands, when all sorts of people have forgotten the journey we went on just now. And I know it's really obvious and I know it's separate, but as a footnote, I think it will be very, very useful to have that noted. So I don't know what other members of the panel feel about that, or maybe Joe, if you want to respond first. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Could I just respond to those points? Yes, totally agree with you. It does need to be really clear on the webpage, who's contactable and who's responsible. I think we need to have good record keeping, as you say, for future, I don't know, something down the line. You kind of want to know who was the person who was involved at that stage. Yes, I can add something in to make clear that, yes, it could be a member from another ward, same party, another ward. It could be different party, same ward. It really is what feels right for the particular circumstances. And yes, when it's reporting back to council, there will also be a reference to the voting issue, because that was another thing that was flagged up about, if proxy voting is possible, which it isn't in the Local Government Act. So that's just not an option. It's not down to local discretion at all. So yeah, be useful for that to be included when it gets reported back to council. Thank you. Okay,
now I've got Alistair Singleton.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. I was very interested, Joe, in the research in 3.5, when you say in one of the councils that you researched with, they had an example of a councillor employing a caseworker to assist as a private arrangement. And that struck me as being a very odd construct. I mean, I've certainly never come across it, and I don't know how common it may be. And I just wonder whether it's something that we would want to have a view on, or whether actually people can have whatever private offices they like doing their work.
So, yes, I don't know much more about it than that, but I got the impression it was very much their own private arrangement. And the Democratic Services contact was made that quite clear in comments. It's that we Democratic Services, we wouldn't normally get involved in casework. It is part of the councillor's role, and therefore we keep that a bit of an arm's length arrangement. And if they choose to do that, then that's fine. But it was very much a kind of personal choice rather than a council arranged process, really. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, and then Councillor Warrington.
Yeah, so the 2-member ward, I just want to make a point that we do need to be careful, because there are 2 members for a reason, because they've got a lot of residents. And what I would really hate to see is one ward member a bit overwhelmed and not feeling they could speak out to get some help with that. So I just want to flag that, because some people do other things other than be council workers, and this is designed to encourage people to become ward members, not discourage them. So I just wanted to make that point. I just wondered what the feeling was with regard to some form of procedure. Normally, if you were going on some form of parental leave, whether it was maternity or paternity, you would have to prove, I use that word advisedly, because that would normally be in a policy that you'd have to have a MAP B1 if you were going on maternity leave, or you would have to declare at least that you were a partner who had child caring responsibilities as well. And I don't know what the situation would be legally with statutory maternity and paternity pay, whether there would be any legal implication with receiving allowances. I suppose if it's allowances rather than salary and we're not an employee, then that would make a difference. But I'd like, because I'm a bit geeky on employment law, if there's anybody I can find out from about that and what, how that, you know, what the subtle difference is, I'd appreciate it, only because I'm a bit, yeah.
Yes, fine. Can I respond, Chair? So I spoke to Cherry when we put this report together, and you're right, you've sort of answered the question really. You know, councillors aren't employees, so that they're not bound by those same regulations and need to prove and everything. But yes, it's a fair point to say that it would be nice to have something spelt out a bit to make that a little bit clearer when it comes to council.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I just wanted to just say though that, you know, this is public money. We get paid through public money, and I just wonder whether we do need some proof of that transparency. And I'm not suggesting that people will go off and pretend to be pregnant, but or pretend to have children. But I'm just wondering from a transparency. It's just an open question.
Yes, I mean, it's sort of straying into what's in the actual policy itself here, which was what was agreed last September, you know, but yeah, fair points. We'll have a think about that. Thank you.
So on that basis, Lucy, you just in there, and would you like to speak?
Sorry, it's just one other, because the policy, I think, in some ways, it's nice that it sets out the kind of almost the straightforward bits about, you know, how we would document everything. But unfortunately, the question isn't really, well, unless I've missed it, isn't really answered about how 9 months of work might be undertaken, how that would be undertaken, the casework by someone else. And it's an impossible question, and we kind of haven't answered it here, I think. I'm not sure what I can suggest, but whether there is some sort of increased ads, you know, for the other person, the other councillor that is left doing the job of 2 people for what might be 9 months. How are they going to do that? Is my, it doesn't really, I mean, I'm glad there's a process, that it's all set out, who to contact, everybody knows, but the big question of how the work is going to happen with all these things isn't really answered, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think you're right, it is a question mark, and I think in a way it's something that can't be known until somebody requests it. The conversation happens with the group leader, with the group assistant, the political assistant, and something's worked out, and maybe we'd need to get some advice from Cherry again at that stage. But yeah, it does need to be sorted out when these things come up, because yes, you don't want too much of a burden on somebody else, or some really unclear situation. So it's a fair point. Yeah, thanks.
But I also think, Lucy, my reading of it, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, is that in a way that the process allows for there to be, for the first time, an actual recognition of the work, and that through the individual taking it over and or the person handing it over, there can at that time be an assessment of the work involved, and where necessary, the group leader might actually provide ongoing support and through the group to actually manage that and raise that up the line if there are problems. And what it brings to mind, and I apologise if this is in the paper because I've only just thought of it after Lucy's comment, is what if the person's on a panel or a committee, presumably do they stand down temporarily from that but keep the allowance, and somebody effectively substitutes without the allowance?
Well, I think that's covered in the policy itself. We'd need to go back and look at that. Yeah, that was approved last September about the actual allowances and payments and things. So probably need to go back and...
Yeah, sorry if I went off. Yes, this is workload, not that. But I think it is, insofar as Lucy raises the point about workload, I know for myself, I'm on various actual things. So it's not just ward work. It's, you know, I'm on the Alice Park Trust and there's meetings and there has to be a person. So anyway, we can cover that. So Michaela, I'd understand that you'll have made notes on this. Yes. Yes.
Well, Chair, can I just add one last point, actually, just to say that it doesn't need to be just the one person who's covering. So it may be that, you know, planning related issues directed to blah blah, or things about this particular local issue are directed to blah blah. So, you know, it might be a range of people, or it might be just that the group assistant is the first point of contact and then they field things out. So yeah, flexibility is the key.
One of the that I think could usefully come out of Lucy's point, though, if you don't mind me going on about the point you've raised, Lucy, is that perhaps we could recommend to council that after there's been a period of the first year, and on the basis we assume that somebody's used this facility, perhaps it could come back to scrutiny to really just for us to have a look at it and review what the experience was and if there are any lessons to learn. And then we would have that ability to put something to council as a recommendation if we were finding things hadn't worked or had any advice. Do you think that would be useful, Jo?
That's fine. Yes, I mean, as you say, you'd need it to have actually been tested in practice, but sure, yeah. Absolutely, keep it under review, and can be tweaked as needed.
So I think I've got everybody has spoken who wants to. We've got a list of those points. Would people on the panel support a proposal, if I put it to you, that if we formulated a proposal along the lines of we've discussed it, Michaela's made the notes, and that I as chair and with Winston sort of draft up something we can send to council with our feedback? Would people be happy if I put that forward? Would somebody second it? Can somebody say if they're going to second it?
I'll second it.
Okay, I'll then put therefore this to the vote. If you'd excuse me, you all heard what was said. I think there wasn't really controversy about any of the points. So if we just put a record of those points to council, could I have a show of those in favour, please? And Michaela, is there anybody against or any abstentions? Michaela, can you say, because you were looking at the screens, what the outcome?
I've got one abstention and the rest are 4, as far as I can see.
Okay, if that's okay, then that's carried. Okay, so
sorry, can I just add a little point that is maybe up for discussion? I wonder whether we could take a more holistic approach in terms of trying to encourage people to stand as ward councillors. So I think this is just one solution to a number of issues to encourage people.
Can I suggest that we note that and take to the agenda setting group? Yeah.
Yep.
Or bring that towards the work plan at the end of the meeting. Yeah. So on that basis, if people are happy, thank you very much, Jo Morrison, for coming today and presenting that paper and for the work you've done. I'd now like to move to item 9, which is Invest in Bath update, and invite Rob Dawson to come to the screen. Before we start, I would just like to ensure that there is some focus in this, because although it's entitled an Invest in Bath update, the actual reason for this was that there was a question asked by one of our members, who will make himself known later, I'm sure, concerning why it was called Invest in Bath as opposed to Invest in Bath and North East Somerset. And there was some concerns and the feeling we needed to scrutinise whether North East Somerset was indeed being addressed as an area to invest in. I don't normally preempt an agenda item, but I just feel it's important, given there was a specific question as well as the update, it's good to bear that in mind. So without further ado, if Rob, would you like to take the floor, please?
Thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon, councillors and colleagues. So I believe you will have all seen the report. What I'd like to do is just share my screen and follow that report up with the short presentation on the service at the same time. So I'll just attempt to do that. So I'm Rob Dawson. I work as an enterprise officer in the business and skills team. Now our team's got a focus on sustainable, inclusive economic growth and in employment growth. We sit within David Trethui's directorate. Our focus today is to talk about the Invest in Bath function, but I thought it'd be good to actually just set out where our team actually sits and our other functions. So Invest in Bath is really the team's business, innovation and inward investment service. We also have a sister brand, which is Achieve in Baines, and that focuses on employment and skills. And our team also delivers the Future Bright pilot, which is about supporting our residents that are in work to progress within their careers. That's an externally funded project. So whilst we're the business and skills team, we operate various different brands and services. Now, the Invest in Bath brand itself actually came about in parallel with the Invest Bristol and Bath service, which is actually the region's inward investment service, to try and attract other companies from elsewhere in the country or the globe to relocate to the area. So that brand actually came about in parallel with Invest Bristol and Bath. What we wanted to do is really try and harness the global reputation and knowledge of Bath, really, to attract that investment. But what I want to make clear is our services and our team's work actually works across the district regardless of location. So as it stands, the Invest in Bath brand has historically been there just to try and take advantage of Bath's location in terms of our outward facing promotion. So our team has been delivering a lot of COVID support in the last 12 months, which has been clearly a very difficult time for the business community. So far, there are around 8,500 businesses in Bath and North East Somerset. It's about a 50-50 split between businesses in Bath, businesses outside of the city. So far, around 3,800 businesses have received COVID grants of some sort. Around £66 million has been delivered. Our team supported that work. We've directly delivered the first tranche of grants, around 43 million. In more recent rounds of grant funding, we've been leading on comms, support work and working with any businesses that are struggling, not sure how to apply or whether they're eligible. And our team to date this year, it's now reached just under 6,000 inquiries that we've directly responded to from either residents or businesses that have got questions or concerns in relation to COVID. Our team's core service, really, that we deliver through Invest in Bath is business support. And the main service, we've just achieved another 2 years of funding through the West of England Combined Authority. It's called Universal Business Support. And it means anyone thinking of starting a business or already running an SME can access free, personalised one-to-one support. This service has been ongoing over the past year, has obviously switched to online support, doing one-to-one on webinar services. Some of the topics have obviously pivoted to help businesses in adapting to COVID. So we've had training on remote management of staff, stress management in terms of pivoting to different markets, also looking at developing a sustainable business too. We've got a large range of additional support schemes as well that we're either managing as a team or we're promoting most of which I've included in the appendix in the reports. That we're constantly updating. We've got around half a dozen new schemes that we know are launching in April. Councillor Samuel alluded to one of those. So we're constantly updating that list. The team also works on sites and premises. So we've got a sites and premises officer. She works in working with commercial agents to support the development and then actually filling new commercial sites and also commercial properties that become vacant. Our team offers a tailored property search service for companies. We actually work, one example would be the chocolate factory in Keynsham, where we worked with the agents there and worked very, very closely to promote those opportunities. We were successful in filling that site, and the offices at the chocolate factory have now become HQs for independent vet care. Pucker Herbs have also taken that as well. We work on the planning side of matters too, so supporting planning strategy. For example, the employment land strategic needs assessment, we're working on that with planning policy at present, and also represent business interests in terms of development management. So we'll provide statements to try and protect and actually increase our employment sites within the district. On the employment and skills side, most of this work is delivered through our sister brands, but I'll briefly touch upon some of these services. One would be the Achieve Bath and North East Somerset brand. They manage a host of projects, including a new employment and skills hub that's actually located in Peasdown St John, but at the moment it's working primarily digitally only, and that's where any residents can access support in attaining and securing new employment, developing new skills, and embarking on training initiatives. We also, as previously mentioned, our team delivers the Future Bright service, which is for people that are on in-work benefits to get free coaching, advice and support to progress either in their current career or perhaps to retrain and move into a new career. This service pivoted in the past year to actually help residents that were at risk of redundancy or even had been made redundant and were out of work. So we've had some successes on that. So in the past year, we've had 640 residents supported, 629 developed personalised action plans, and over 200 partook in training courses. Most recently, the team's been working with employees of Dickies in the Westfield Industrial Estate that are affected by the forthcoming redundancies there. And just to put into a bit of context, so our team's been working really hard to try and communicate a lot of these messages about COVID grants and what support is out there to our networks. So in the past year, we've had 17,000 unique users use the Invest in Bath website, 24,000 sessions. Mainly due to COVID, we've seen a huge increase in our e-newsletter subscribers. Now we have an audience of over 3,000. Our Twitter followers have also increased. But what we've tried to do is identify new channels too, for example, by building our links with other business support networks like Salford Business Network, the Keynsham Business Network, Soma Valley Chamber of Commerce, to help send out regular bulletins of what our team is doing, what support is available to the business community, and really try and push the messages of what support is out there. Our team is relatively small. We've got 9 officers, but 1 vacant post at the moment. So that's 8 officers looking after a business community of over 8,000. So what I would say is we're always open to working with councillors. If you have suggested businesses that you feel need support or would benefit from engagement for our officers, our team does arrange one-to-one meetings with businesses, online only at the moment, to understand what their support needs are and direct them to the right support. And we'd happily attend any events or any meetings that you feel would be appropriate to introduce our service as well. So I hope that's given you a bit of an update. I was going to finally give you a quick walkthrough of the actual Invest in Bath site, and then take any questions that the panel has. So this is the live. Sorry, have I lost the screen share there? Apologies. This is a live Invest in Bath site. The focus is across the top. The inward investment and promoting the district, it really falls under Baines for Business. You have a workspace, so this is for any business looking for sites, premises, business support focus, and then news as well, which we update regularly. Typically, it will be about positive business news stories. For example, we've got a webinar for retailers to help them adapt and move to digital training. In the Baines for Business section, we also have specific pages dedicated to different areas within the district. For example, Keynsham. So we do have information on different areas. We also have shortcuts to, for example, if I was to type in Summer Norton as a shortcut, yeah, that takes straight through to a Midsummer Norton page. What we are keen to do is improve and expand the content for these areas, and this is something we're looking to take away. For a business that's searching this information, for example, if they were to go to business support, we've got some different sections here, typically COVID, so financial help during COVID-19, climate emergency business support. We've got a list of some of the main environmentally friendly projects that are currently available. City and Town Centre support talks about some of those projects, for example, reopening the towns and cities safely as well. Finally, I'll just show you the property search function we also have. So we have specific pages on different development sites, and the property search function as well. You can use the West of England property search tool, which links through. You can target particular areas. You'll see each district within the West of England area has got particular locations and sub-locations. For example, Foster Search, Keynsham, Midsummer Norton, for say industrial space. Select size criteria. And it'll bring up results here. What we'd also always encourage is that if any business has an inquiry or a property requirement, to contact us directly. We'll be able to engage them, find out what their support needs are, and then conduct a tailored search. Okay, so that was a brief run through the service. I don't know if any of the panel had any particular questions.
Yeah, I'll now open up the discussion for questions. So I'll look at the chat, and I believe our first question comes from Councillor Hal McPhee. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Sorry, having microphone issues earlier on. Thank you very much for that presentation. I did also have a look at that website, and I went in and looked at the businesses, and I found that of all the businesses you featured, only one, which was employed 20 people, was from North East Somerset. And also, when I'm in North East Somerset, I've been asked by residents there why there isn't an Invest in North East Somerset website. And I've never had a clear answer. Can you explain to me why there isn't an Invest in North East Somerset website?
Thank you, Councillor. I think certainly that is an issue that has become more apparent in the past 12 months as well, as more businesses have become aware of the service through the COVID grants. They have quite rightly wanted to be reassured that our service is actually for them too. So I think that is something we would look to take on. What I would be clear is our website and our service is to help businesses invest in Bath and North East Somerset, not just in Bath. And clearly, in terms of commercial space and opportunities, if a business has approached us looking for industrial space, for example, far more likely that actually we'd land them in North East Somerset rather than the city of Bath, just because of the makeup of our commercial stock. So I think in terms of case studies, that is something we've definitely want to rectify. So in terms of building up our case study base, we've got a new business engagement program which we're just embarking upon. And something that we're very keen to do is target some of our larger employers in North East Somerset, and yeah, build our links with those employees and actually produce more case studies. So I think in terms of our case studies today, we've just highlighted Fresh Range.
So if you came back in 6 months, there would be an invest in North East Somerset website?
I think as it stands, we're looking to refresh and improve our websites. So in terms of the title, what we'd need to do is clear that with yourselves, with councillors, but also test it with the users. Clearly, part of our audience is a global audience. Around 15% of our hits come from outside of the United Kingdom. So it is a case in point that Bath has a global reputation. So it is important that we do have Bath at the forefront of any inward investment marketing materials. In terms of our work with our existing and Indigenous business community, we need to feel, they do need to feel that this service is for them and that they have some ownership over our service. So I think in terms of our sister brand, Achieve in Baines, there could be a question of do we actually replicate that for the Invest brand? Historically, we haven't, but I think that's a very valid point and something we should consider.
If I just make one more comment, I mean, there's an enterprise zone that's supposed to get going in the Summer Valley, and I don't think there's much in the budget for it this year. So when you talk to residents in the Summer Valley, they tell you pretty strongly that they don't really feel that there is much encouragement to invest in North East Somerset. And although I accept the point that Bath has a global brand, actually North East Somerset in the Mendips and close to Glastonbury and other things has a very strong brand that could be promoted. So I certainly would like to see, and I believe other people would like to see that invest in North East Somerset. We can go back to our residents and say, you see, we are promoting you. We are going to invest. There is money going in. We can't say that at the moment.
Right, Councillor Warrington.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so just to follow up on 2 points. One is definitely we need some representation in North East Somerset. Loads of businesses, really good quality businesses, and I think you'll find potentially more setting up. We've got a lot of agricultural land and market gardens and things like that. And I think one of the issues with the pandemic is that people are really looking about where their food comes from. We've seen a 300-fold increase in allotments, let alone market gardens. So some of my residents are setting up market gardening. and there are lots and lots of really good quality businesses around. So that would be fantastic to tap into that. And it also taps into, maybe our visitors as well, because we've got some incredible heritage as well, from Radstock, mining heritage, Midsummer Norton mining, right out to the Chew Valley, mining and recreational. So I think, all of these companies can align, and we can treat that holistically. And the other issue I just wanted to ask was, do you engage with some of the Chamber of Commerce? So Chew Valley has its own Chamber of Commerce as well. I just wanted to make sure that you were engaged with them, and that they were contributing as well, because that will be that they would probably be one of your users, or would promote invest in North East Somerset. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. So I think that's a really good point. We are seeing an increase in demand for space outside of the city in terms of commercial occupiers, and there are some fantastic businesses. I've personally had one-to-one engagement meetings with many businesses in North East Somerset. So I think what has happened over the past 12 months is we have been sidetracked with the pandemic, and our work has been really more focused in delivering the grants. And I think as now we're coming out of it, it's our engagement work and supporting the recovery and growth is really important. So yes, your points are very valid there. In terms of Chamber of Commerce's, yes, we do engage with them. So we know the Chew Valley Chamber and the chair there. We had a meeting with them, say it was around a fortnight ago. So a lot of our engagement is starting to pick up now. We have dedicated business engagement officers, and they're getting very active once more.
Okay, I wanted to speak as myself. I first raised this issue in 2015, and at that time it was strongly resisted. And ever since, the idea of changing the term invest in Bath to invest in North Bath and North East Somerset. But I'd be quite concerned if we had a separate site, because I feel that the choice we have of a city and the hinterland around of North East Somerset actually adds a greater choice for inward investment, and also for all businesses within our area and in the UK to expand and develop. And so I would strongly support the idea. In fact, I'd like to almost propose from this panel that we request, if people support it, that it's actually called Invest in Bath and North East Somerset, because the talk that Bath has to get a mention is still there. It's Bath and North East Somerset. So I don't see how somebody from around the world wouldn't come up in a search and see the word Bath and think any less of investing or not, as the argument I was told, because North East Somerset was attached. And if they did, I'd just have to question how good a commitment they were to invest if they couldn't work out that Bath and North East Somerset was a place, and there was something more than Bath, but Bath was still there. So I think it really not only sends the wrong message, but it doesn't make the most of the business community that we actually have and what that community has to offer in itself. So, as I say, as we come towards the end, if you want to think about it, I'd be quite keen to propose, if people support it, that we actually change the name properly to Invest in Bath and North East Somerset. Does anybody else want to? Oh, sorry, Rob, you ought to have a right of reply first.
No problem, Chair. I think that's certainly something that the team itself would consider. Clearly, we need to test this amongst the user base as well, so the business community, including North East Somerset businesses. part of any process to refresh and rebrand.
Okay, thank you for that. I've got Councillor Lucy Hodge next.
Hello, Rob. Thank you very much. I mean, I found the report really useful. Actually, I didn't understand much about Invest in Bath service, and I have it set me thinking about how we can promote that within Lansdowne and to the businesses that arise from there. But I had 3 questions really about how things work. So I would like to understand how Invest in Bath sits alongside Invest in Bristol and Bath, funded by WECA. I know that's supposed to be inward investment and your outward facing investment. Is there any overlap in what you do, or do you just kind of work in parallel? The other question was about the 9 core funded posts. So funded internally, are they full time or half time? How does that work? And the externally funded post 6 for the Future Bright team is because that's on for people within work benefits. Does that come with the grants, or how is that funded? And finally, I just wanted to, Richard Samuel touched upon us receiving more information about the COVID grants, all that work that has gone on. And I would be quite interested in that. I'm sure everyone would, the 65 million handed out to 3,800 businesses. So it's kind of an average of 17,000 a business, which, you know, I had to double check those figures because it seems like it should be more than that. But it would be nice to see the distribution and have more information on how that sum broke down, and whether some businesses received a lot more and what types of businesses received the money, that type of thing in the future, perhaps when people have got time to analyse that data. I realise it's a lot of work. So the 2 key questions were about how you work alongside the WECA Invest in Bristol and Bath, and a bit more about the posts that are doing the work. Thank you.
Thank you for those questions. So in terms of our relationship with Invest Bristol and Bath, so they will focus more on the global campaigns and various propositions to businesses. So they'll potentially receive more leads from central government, Department for International Trade, and then they'll be competing with the likes of Manchester and other locations to try and land these businesses. In terms of how our relationships work, we have monthly meetings with the team over at the WECA offices, or at the moment clearly online. But if we actually have any leads, that they may come to us and say, we've got a company interested in investing, and we'll have to come up with property solutions, or potentially some information about either Bath or Keynsham or whatever location they're interested. For example, schools, quality of life, or other factors that are of interest to that individual company. So that's how they work. We both work in terms of aftercare as well. So it's supporting businesses after they've invested here to make sure they've got support in employing people. And also 90% of our work is working with existing businesses, trying to retain them here. So ensuring they've got the right sites and premises to expand within the district. Worst case scenario, we keep them in the region, but we want to keep them in the district primarily. In your second, on the spot, I'm going to struggle with an actual FTE figure, because we've got quite a few officers that are full-time. A few work 4 days per week, a couple 3 days per week, but a rough estimate, I'd say about 6 full-time equivalent posts, between 6 and 7. And the Future Bright team, it was funded through a Department for Work and Pensions grant. That funding has changed recently, and that's now WECA funding. Hence the slight change there's some slight changes to their services. So from April, they won't be able to work with people that are out of work. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you.
Okay, Now, I've got 3 more speakers and I'm very conscious of time. So first of all, I've got Councillor Dogood, then Councillor Hughes, then Councillor McPhee. And I propose after that, we'll move on unless somebody's very keen. So Councillor Dogood next, please.
Yeah, thanks, Rob, for the presentation and also the appendix, Invest in Bath appendix, which was very well received and worth a read. It's following on Councillor Hodges' theme, really. I just wanted to understand what you implement and what WECA implements. So you haven't mentioned the Digital Skills Investment Programme, the Low Carbon Challenge Fund, the Small Business Resilience Grant Programme, the Culture and Creative Industry Business Support Programme. I presume those are all administered by WECA rather than yourself, or whether you could confirm that or not. And the other thing I'm particularly interested coming out of COVID and other issues in the development of the green economy and the fact that so much is going to be put on the skills side going forward is what's your involvement with the adult education budget? Do you implement that, or is that something else that's done through another agency? Thanks.
I was on mute, sorry. In terms of most of the grants that you mentioned there, Councillor, they are administered by the WECA. So a lot of those grants actually came through their recovery funds. But we are involved in every stage of that process. So we've been on working groups helping shape those funds and trying to make sure they're of most benefit for Bath and North East Somerset businesses or residents. So we have a role there, and once those grants are launched, we take a promotional focus. So we're just trying to get the word out because you've got limited funds. Our aim is always to maximise the number of Bath and North East Somerset businesses or residents that benefit from these funds. So there's a competitive angle to it. So from our perspective, most of the grants on that list and the ones that are coming forward in the next couple of months are administered by the WECA. In terms of the adult education budget, that's not my area of expertise. We do have a skills officer and my manager does lead on that. But yeah, she is involved in those conversations and helping to distribute the adult education budget. But I think primarily that's with the WECA as well.
Okay, Councillor Hughes.
Thanks. Hi, Rob. Just very quickly, I'm just trying to understand the primary objective here, because I'm led to, am I right in saying that the primary objective here is inward investment rather than business support of existing businesses? The reason I say that is looking at the presentation and the websites, it mentions COVID, climate. Brexit is nowhere to be seen, which is obviously one of the biggest issues that most businesses are going to be facing, particularly with import and export declarations and such like. So I'm just trying to understand the balance of whether your focus is, whether it's primarily the inward investment or local business support.
Hi, Councillor. Yeah, so the primary focus of our work to date has been in looking after existing businesses and actually encouraging startups. I'd say over 90% of our work is focused on that, supporting existing businesses. In terms of Brexit, yeah, that is a chief concern. Again, I think it's been somewhat drowned out by our work on COVID activity. We actually had a Brexit support event, which we had to actually cancel due to going into lockdown a year previous. But that we are getting more inquiries regarding trade and Brexit. And whilst we don't have that expertise in-house, there are services that we're directing people to, one of which is the Growth Hub. And clearly they've got dedicated advisors that can help with trade matters. We've also got Business West, who have got the Department for International Trade Contracts running export and import workshops as we speak. Perhaps we need to make that more front and center of our website once more, though. We did have a dedicated section on Brexit. It's just up to date, we've been following demand most of our businesses have been asking about COVID grants and what support's out there right now. So we have reacted to that immediately.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor McPhee. Are you on mute? Yeah, are you there?
Back now. I just wanted to say that I disagree with your proposal. I still think North East Somerset should stand on its own 2 feet, and it should be presented on its own 2 feet. And the only way that I would go forward with a joint one would be if it was invest in North East Somerset and Bath.
Okay, well, fair enough. You put that forward if that's what you want. You were the one that raised this. But I certainly think it needs to be more than invest in Bath. So I've got no more speakers. As you're the last, Helen, you've ended by talking about a proposal. Do you want to put that to the meeting as a proposer?
Certainly.
Okay, is there a seconder?
So I'm not 100% sure what the proposal is.
Well, let's come to it. My proposal is that there is a separate website, Invest in North East Somerset, that is properly presented and worked out by this team.
Would that mean, Hal, for clarification, that both sites would have reference to the other? Because what my concern would be is, as Bath is the better known, more internationally and nationally, say, than North East Somerset, which is merely a construct for council purposes, really, and a constituency. Can we then be clear that you could go to either and at least access the other? Because North East Somerset might be in danger of losing out for people who've never heard of it, who have heard of Bath. So could we have the cross-referencing in your proposal?
That will come anyway. What we need.
Well, it needs it. I can have an answer to the question though. Can it definitely be there in both to cross-reference in your proposal?
Yes. However, the whole proposition for North East Somerset will be quite different to the Bath one, and will take them quite a lot of work to get to it. That's my point. And if you leave it as Bath and North East Somerset, they won't put that much work into the North East Somerset. And it's a very different proposition. We know a lot of people are commuting in North East Somerset because the jobs aren't there. We know it's going to be much cheaper. The housing is going to be much cheaper. The whole proposition is quite different to the Bath one, which is we're a great big international hub. So you just can't equate the two. They've got to be presented differently.
Okay, Sean, are you any clearer now on what's been proposed?
I guess so. I mean, yeah. I mean, I'm sure there must be some way for, if we have got these two options, Bath and a North East Somerset one, there must be a way, firstly, for them both to coexist on the same website, even if there's two big buttons at the start. But I think any businesses that are looking to invest in our area would see the benefit of a rural area and an urban area, rather than separating the two completely apart from each other. So I would say I'm in favour of the two coexisting together and having their own identities.
Well, could I come back on this? Is, in a way, Rob made a point that if it's a given that, say, as Hal says, we believe there's a problem of both having that representation of North East Somerset and ensuring it's actually created, yeah, could it be that a bit of research is needed with the potential users to find out the best way to actually construct it. And I don't mean construct it to overcome what you've said, Al, because you can have separate URLs and virtually separate sites, but where information is shared with a content management system between, to save it all being rewritten a bit. But before we actually make a really firm recommendation, could we recommend that they go away and look at it and come back with a proposal as to how it could be best achieved to meet what you want, Al, which is the representation, and in a way that actual users would understand?
I'm happy with that.
Yeah, because at the moment, I'm keen that you and I have proposed a sort of two sides of the same coin, which are equally valid, and Sean's made a comment. It might be that some more reflection and them coming back would give us a chance to debate it and refine it in the best way, rather than tying their hands as officers.
Yeah.
So
we'll invite them to come back in a few months.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Rob, do you think if we put this motion forward, that subject to it being approved, we could agree a time scale for you in the next few weeks when it would be reasonable to come back? Because I equally, Al, don't want to see this seen as going into the long grass. And there is sometimes a danger with a bit more reflection that it takes an awful long time to come back. So, so on that basis, Al, do you want to formulate something, some words just now to put to people?
Well, do we need to vote here, or can
well, I think for the panel to request and initiate work by officers, it will be much stronger and better if we could just define a motion and quite clearly show we've agreed it as a majority or unanimously or not by the panel, because then it can be minuted and it will stand. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it is quite important just to make sure something happens that's the case. So do you want to formulate something, say something as a proposal then?
So what would we looking for? Looking for a proposal which clearly indicates invest in North East Somerset as a key and separate element of the proposition.
Yeah, and perhaps if we could have, and the officers take away this idea and come back to us in 3 months or as agreed, yeah, to report back on their thoughts to the panel.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd like to second that. Could I have a show of hands of all those in favour of that motion, please? Okay, and are there any people against? And are there any abstentions? And Michaela, can you read out the result that you saw?
I think that was all agreed.
Splendid. And I'd like to thank both Al for raising this for the agenda today, and for Rob coming along giving such a comprehensive presentation, and for everybody joining in and giving their input. So on that basis, I believe
Chair, Councillor Hodge has got a hand up, Chair.
Oh, Councillor Hodge. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, Councillor Hodge. Did I miss you off the end of the speakers?
Yeah, no, don't worry. We covered that point. I just wanted the COVID grant scheme analysis to go for another meeting as well, if you think that would be suitable.
Yeah, if we pull that forward with Karen's comment to the work plan, which we're coming to, not to cut you off, but we'll bring, if you can remember that for item 11, and Councillor Warrington, her point, we'll tackle that under 11. Okay.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you.
Oh. So our next item is item 10, which is an update on the parish charter. And the reason this was coming to the agenda was primarily that the parish charter previously sort of became very outdated and out of touch. And there was an aspiration from people on the working group that did this most recent parish charter that we try on a regular basis to really review and consider whether it needs updating, so that incremental changes can be considered rather than having to start from scratch. And it was a huge process to produce this latest plan. So with that as an introduction, I'm pleased to introduce introduce Dave Dixon, Community Engagement Manager, to give a short presentation. And is Dave Dixon there, please?
Right, yeah. Sorry. Good evening, Chair, councillors. I've got a very short presentation to give you, only 6 slides. You should have had a link to an appendix, which was the progress report against commitments that was from May 2019, which is about 10 pages of quite heavy text. So I've tried to consolidate some of that into the presentation, which is looking like it doesn't want to show me. Hang on a second. There we go. Can everybody see that? Hello?
Yes, they won't say yes, Dave, because they're all on mute. But
okay, brilliant. So, update on the parish charter, North and North East Somerset.
There's nothing on screen at the moment.
No, actually, now I'm there isn't. So, Michaela, are you able to offer Councillor Dixon? Are you offered to Officer Dixon to actually share, or is it?
I can't do that at the moment. No, I don't. I'm not. No.
You can make him co-host.
You should be able to share the screen.
Or allow everybody to share the screen.
Yeah, he's already co-host, so you should be able to share the screen. If you bottom button, share screen.
And then pick the right application that you've got open.
Yeah. What's gone wrong here now then?
Michaela, does anybody else present have the presentation? Michaela, do you have it that was circulated that you could share for Dave?
Everyone has the slides if he wants to talk through them, but I'm not sure how to do that from my end. No.
Dave is a co-host, so he should be able to do this now.
He should indeed, but he doesn't appear to be able to. Well, look, Dave.
I have the slides. If somebody is able to allow me to show them, I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah. For some reason, it's cutting you all out when I put my. Let me try it one more time.
Well, cutting us all out, we all disappear anyway, and you get your presentation.
Right. Now it's up on my screen.
So did you click share?
Yeah.
And then pick the presentation? Okay.
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't want to see the word.
Now, Councillor Elliott, he is co-host, so he might be able to do it.
Thank you for that, Councillor Kumar. So, Councillor Elliott, can you share your screen, please?
Yep, just give me a second.
Yeah, that works fine.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Hang on a minute. I think I might.
Right, if we could all go back on mute and then leave Dave to actually give the presentation.
Yeah, sorry about that, Chair, councillors. I'm not quite sure what happened there, bit of a technical hitch. Like I said, there's only 6 slides, very short. Obviously, the appendix 1 is 10 pages of quite detailed text about the parish charter and some of the work that we've been doing over the last couple of years. If I have the next slide, please. So 2020, I think everybody will agree, was a bit of an unprecedented year and involved a magnificent local response, which was based on networks, relationships, and an awful lot of collaboration, which wouldn't have been able to have taken place quite as effectively, to be perfectly honest, unless we'd spent literally years and years building relationships between the parish and town councils across Bath and North East Somerset. There are 2 quotes there, one from a quite sizable parish, quite sizable village, that distributed information with our support to every household. That was over 400 or 500 houses. That was 2,000 people. And then Life Raft, which was again an interesting one that we were involved in, which involved Freshford and Limpley Stoke. Now, as I'm sure you're aware, Freshford is obviously in Bath and North East Somerset. Limpley Stoke is in Wiltshire, but when you go there geographically, they're virtually intertwined, and it's very difficult to tell the difference. And indeed, if you were a local resident there, you probably would just be expecting the support to come irrespective of where you actually lived. So it was quite interesting in a sense, some of the activities that were going on. One of the downsides of the parish charter is, unfortunately, one of the things we weren't able to do, despite the requests from a number of parishes, we weren't allowed to share sensitive data on people that were shielding this time last year. And 12 months ago, there were about 8,000 or more people shielding in Bath and North East Somerset, but you cannot share their medical data with any other organisations without their explicit consent to start with. So that was a little bit difficult, but not something that when we put the parish charter together, we ever thought that we would, to be honest, have to deal with. So if I could have the next slide, please. So the purpose of the parish charter is to provide a framework for us to work together to serve people of Bath and North East Somerset, a common purpose to promote the well-being of Bath and North East Somerset, and we all serve the same residents. The charter's been in existence since 1999. 1999 was the year of the second round of local government elections for Bath and North East Somerset. The first one is in 95. And by that time, a lot of the parish and town councils had suddenly come to realise that they probably wanted a bigger voice with Bath and North East Somerset Council, which was only in its infancy, had only been in existence for 3 years. And so the charter was put together back then and developed over time, and then undertook a large revision in 2006. And it was adopted in May 2018 again. And a further review and progress update was undertaken and reported back to full council in 2019, and that was partly the report with the link that I sent you. So since that time, minor amendments to the terms of reference have been made, and they've been agreed by ALCA, which is the Avon Local Councils Association, which is an organisation that represents not all, but the vast majority of parish and town councils, not just in Bath and North East Somerset, but also in South Gloucestershire and in North Somerset as well. So next slide, please. So basically, if we look at the parish charter activity just in 2020, delivering on the council's 5 core commitments, obviously what we've done is we've worked very closely together in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and that has taken up vast majority of my time and my team's time. In fact, we've been seconded to the Community Wellbeing Hub at Peasdown. I have for just over a year now, and a lot of our work has been developed by working closely with some of those parishes, who in particular were able to respond very rapidly to their local community needs. And if I were to tell you that this time last year, we were in danger of being seriously swamped by demand from shielding people in particular, and just the general population, and actually parish and town councils saved us because they just came to us for advice and guidance. We were able to share best practice with them about what other parishes and town councils were doing. And we knew that we had to push all of as much of the activity that was required down to the grassroots level as possible. And again, the parish charter and the trust and the arrangements that have been set up as a result of that were pretty instrumental. So to give you just a very quick example, for instance, in the last year, we've done something like 900 emergency food parcels where people were absolutely desperate. And yet out of those 800, only about 10 went to the Chew Valley, which is a remarkable figure when you think about it, but partly because a lot of the parishes down there were very, very good at getting together and working much more closely together. And again, we worked with them to offer support such as PPE, public health information, signposting, and so forth. The only thing we couldn't do, like I said, was share actual individuals' personal medical data, which is what 1 or 2 of them wanted. Making it happen. So the introduction of the Zoom meetings, and we work closely again with the parishes, and that has provided better engagement and has enabled a lot more people to participate in some of these meetings. Often people that wouldn't normally have come because they were able to do it from the comfort of their own front room instead of actually literally having to go out the door, especially over the winter period. And then the parish liaison and working groups have continued to meet virtually during 2020. So we have our regular parish liaison and we have our regular chairs and vice chairs of the working groups meetings, and they continue. And review of the COVID-19 community activity in June 2020, because again, we did a big survey of all the parishes to see what they were doing, just to identify the impact of the local COVID-19 response. And again, a number of lessons that could be learned by Bath and North East Somerset about how to deal with particularly difficult circumstances and how to make best use of grassroots activity and grassroots people taking part. And the next slide, please. So strengthening relationship. During this time, the Ward Councils Initiative and the Ward Councils Empowerment Fund will continue to be developed and encourage engagement with parishes to identify shared projects, so that some of the individual ward councillors could team up with some of their parish and town councils, and actually the parishes put some of their own money into some of that particular shared activity. And then again, working with some, like I said, we've mentioned Freshford and Limpley Stoke. They work very closely together to deliver a COVID-19 response, which was particularly relevant for Freshford because, of course, their surgery that was there, which was run by the doctors of Beckington and is so a different CCG, that one closed down about 12-18 months ago, so they didn't even have a local doctor's surgery actually in Freshford and Limpley Stoke for people to attend or to even get advice from. So that was a good piece of work with the chairs of Freshford and Limpley Stoke. We did set up in January 2020 a clerks group, so clerks of all the parish and town councils. Unfortunately, we were only able to meet once so far due to the COVID, and that was basically for them to share best practice amongst themselves as officers, and also for us to work more closely with them and the chairs of their individual councils. And again, we've set up working groups to respond to local issues. For example, there was an awful lot of advice that was needed by some of them about what do they do about their local parks and open spaces. Because if you remember back for a time, an awful lot of them were chained up and people couldn't access the public and open spaces at all. And then our regular e-bulletins, our e-connect interagency bulletins and funding bulletins, we send out every month a bulletin to 850, 900 different organisations and community groups across Bath and North East Somerset. And that is incredibly well received, especially the funding elements, and quite significant amounts of funding have been awarded to different parishes as a result of those bulletins. And then finally, making the best use of our skills and resources. One of the other things that I'm responsible for was the remainder of the Section 106 youth funding, which we have been allocating to parish councils over the last 12 months, and that is in excess of, well, it's in excess of about £200,000 has actually gone to a number of different parishes and towns. And a lot of that focuses on collaboration and engagement working. And also, interestingly, as a result of the last 12 months, a lot of it is going to go towards identifying issues particularly around mental health and well-being in the under 25s. And then we've been exploring a number of procurement options with our procurement colleagues, particularly street lighting contracts, because it's quite remarkable how many parish and town councils out there actually own street lighting. And there is no collaborative agreement with us as Baines in ways to be able to support them, which is something that we're working on. And then finally, I think this is the last slide. Is it the last slide? Yeah. And then on top of that, obviously with the parish charter, we've got all our community engagement work. So our connecting community forums have met in 2020 in February, July, August, October and November. Parish liaison meetings continue to take place. They were a very valuable resource and been extremely well attended by chairs and clerks from the different parishes. Our interagency meetings and bulletins continue to happen on a monthly basis. We've held a number, several, in fact, probably more than 20 webinars on specific topics and various consultation events, sometimes very well attended with 150, 160 people coming to the webinars. We presented the Chairs Community Awards during the summer. That was done, though, virtually, as opposed to having a large bash at the banqueting room in the Guild Hall. And they were very well received by large sections of the community. And then obviously, finally, we undertook the budget meetings with Councillor Samuel in the autumn. We held 3 of those, which again were well attended by local people, where Councillor Samuel was able to put forward his proposals and the council's proposals for the budget. So that's a sort of brief 6-slide canter through the last 12 months. And actually, when you go through it all, it looks like quite a lot, because it is quite a lot when you think that for probably 6 months of the last year, myself and my team's day job went literally out the window. There were weeks and weeks went by when we did nothing but deliver to people. Yeah, and that's for a team of 4 of us, 4 FTE. That's it, Chair. Thank you very much. I'm quite happy to take any questions.
You're on mute, Paul.
You're muted, Paul.
Right, so very, very good, very full and comprehensive. There's just one slide missing, which was the purpose of the session, and that was, what do we need to do, if anything, to update the parish charter as a result of the experience of the last year? If there are, in your view, no points that need to be put forward to update it, to keep it relevant, then that's excellent. But I suppose that's the $64,000 question for the whole agenda item. So would you be able to comment on, is there anything in the parish charter we need to update as a result of all that?
There is. Obviously, we've been working very closely with ALCA and their representatives, and some of the changes to the terms of reference and amendments were made, and they were adopted by us in May of 2020. So this year coming, again, we will again look and review on the last 6 months to see if there is anything that needs changing as a result of what's happened. Part of the problem, I think, Chair, is that when we thought we got to the times where we could have periods of reflection, because we actually had some breathing space to talk to the parishes and town councils about how they think what had worked and what hadn't worked, we found ourselves in another lockdown and going almost back to square one again. And everybody was focused on delivery as opposed to reflection. But I'm rather hoping that now, after Easter, we will be in a position where the parishes, we will be able to survey the parishes and town councils again, like we did last year, and say, you know, what can we learn? I think one of the things was data sharing, definitely. One of the things was about communications between council services within our council and those individual parish councils, but that's been a bugbear for some of them for some considerable time. But I think at the moment, everybody, certainly on the parish and town council side, will be looking for an opportunity to comment, but we're probably not quite there yet to ask them.
Okay, and also, can the parish charter, can they consider the extent and use of Zoom, which was never considered in the original thing? Now, I know there's a overall government position on that, but it would be interesting to know for non-statutory meetings, the position and encouragement or not, or their interest in Zoom and making it relevant to the charter.
Yeah, Chair, I think I know that the clerks in particular have been very keen to be able to continue with the Zoom, and to the extent that they are writing to the local MPs and so forth. And I understand from somebody who attended a local government association webinar last Friday, that question was asked, and one of the legal representatives seemed to think that there may be some relaxation in the time frame to allow parish and town councils to meet for longer through the Zoom facility. The original idea was that maybe some committee meetings would need to be in person, but some of the other ones could be done through Zoom as a sort of hybrid model. But I understand it may be that there is going to be an announcement which says that parish and town councils are going to be able to continue with the current set of circumstances for a bit longer.
Excellent. Right. And I believe now I have Councillor McPhee wishes to speak.
My only question was, looking through it, I wasn't sure that I saw something when things go wrong, when a parish council's not happy with something. Do you have a mechanism for dealing with that, or not?
when a parish council's not happy with an officer of the council, or the council in particular.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is, and it'll be in that 10-page. It's going to be in that 10-page document, and I know it's in there, and I'm just looking at it now.
We're here to scrutinise, but we're not really there to deal with the the details.
Yeah, I'm looking again, Chair. I'm sure it's in there somewhere, but it's probably in there in several sections about.
Yeah. Well, no worries. I'll check.
But we do. I mean, I think Councillor Murphy. I mean, I think what we do find is that an awful lot of significant issues do get raised at parish liaison meetings, which are very well attended, and the parishes are very keen to come forward with things that they don't think work. And also we do get a lot of support and advice and guidance through the meetings with the parish clerks and with ALCA in particular. So what they'll often tend to do is they might do it through ALCA as an organisation, who will then come to us to say, actually, there's a bit of an issue with that service, or we've got an issue with that particular service delivery in a particular area, and we deal with it in that way. So it's done in a more sort of, I suppose, collaborative way with the parishes. So we're trying to sort of communicate and engage with them on a regular basis. So not necessarily, I mean, we put it in there on page 3, actually. We will work with our respective organisational policies and procedures to deal with complaints. But they tend to bring them through the parish liaison group. The parish liaison group, which was established in 2016 and comprises of representatives of parishes, ALCA and BANES. So there is, if you like, a formal avenue for parishes to raise those things. But thankfully, it doesn't happen very often, because I think we manage through communication and collaboration to sort out most of the issues beforehand, before they become a complaint, really.
Okay.
Okay, are there any other questions from members of the panel? No? Oh yeah, Lucy?
Only quickly to say, it sounds like community engagement have had to work really hard during the pandemic, and should we, with the deliveries and how that's taken over a lot of their time, and should we recognise that here? I just thought, as a committee.
Yeah, I think that's very good. If everybody's happy with that. Yeah. So
that's very kind of you, Chair, Councillor. When I volunteered to be redeployed, they told me it was going to be for 12 weeks.
Yeah. Right. So on that basis, you did a review of comments in 2020, but they were noted, but you're now going to do one again. And could I propose that as and when those comments are made, that we ask it to come back to us, and we put a proposal potentially to council, subject to what they are, to make sure they're captured, because the parish charter, as I understand it, can only be changed by council and the councils. So to change it, if that's what the people want and the parishes want, the BANES Council would need to have a vote too. So could I propose that we request that to come back to us to make sure that they are captured, what the parishes want, yeah? So are people happy if I make a proposal on that basis? Is there a seconder to second that? Okay. Is nobody willing to second? I'll withdraw it.
Yeah, I'll happily second.
We've got three or
Sorry,
four.
people were waving.
3 or 4 queuing up. Yeah.
Oh, I'm in MIS and I can't on an iPhone because my
both Councillor Warrington and Councillor Singleton were very sharp on putting their hands up. So perhaps Councillor Singleton would give us all party sort of with the Sean's support, all party support for.
All right. So we've got that seconded. Could I have a show for Michaela to see of all those in favour? And any against? And any abstentions? So Michaela, the result is?
All in favour.
Splendid stuff. It just remains to thank you, Dave Dixon, for coming today and giving such a comprehensive report. we look forward to the outcome and for everybody for joining in that discussion. So we now move on to agenda item 11, our last agenda item, which is our work plan. Now, you'll see in the document circulated that for today, we obviously had the items we've just covered, which was parental leave, update on the parish charter and invest in Bath update. For the 24th of May, we've got policy and corporate strategy. And we've then got, for July, we've got people strategy update report. And then we've got some items below that don't actually have a date where they're future items. Now, I remember that Karen and then Lucy, you both had items you'd like to put forward. So could I invite Karen first?
Yeah, can I just make a point with regard to the communication, contacting the council? I think I might have made it before, so apologies if I have. But they're nowhere near ready to give an update, so I don't know when that will be. I just happened to speak to Tracy Long, or I think that came out in some email communication with Tracy Long. So I would like to explore a holistic approach to encourage more ward councillors from diverse backgrounds, and that includes younger councillors as well, if I may be so bold as to, because I think the parental leave is really, I don't even think it's a sticking plaster on encouraging people to become ward councillors.
Would you like to refer to that? Do you mean in improving the diversity in all aspects, yeah? To ensure
Yes.
we have equal access, equality, and the maximum representation breadth, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Now, can I just check, Michaela, are you able to answer now? Is that something that's within our panel's remit?
I'll check that. I'm not sure entirely. So can I come back to you with one?
Yeah. If Karen, if we can make a note of that and explore that in the agenda planning meeting and come back to everybody at the next meeting, yeah. And then, Councillor Hodges, you had an item earlier on. Would you like to raise that now?
Yeah, so I had one item just to do with the COVID grant schemes. Richard Samuel had suggested we had a bit more of a closer look at the work that's been done and a little bit of analysis on who got what, because it's a large sum of money, 65 million that's been distributed, quite a big piece of work. I did have a second issue that I wondered whether would be suitable for scrutiny as well. Shall I mention that now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, it was the I wrote before the meeting actually, but it was quite late, so you might not have seen it. But it was the preparing for the future strategy, the corporate strategy, and it's not really with an intention to change anything, but really to scrutinise the strategy a little bit more. It's claims of you know, cost benefit and reduced travel and improve staff satisfaction and productivity. I just feel that it would be good to have some information on all those parameters of the strategy, just so that we can feel really assured that it is actually delivering all the things it is supposed to deliver. I mean, just a simple thing like a staff survey of the staff that were going to be working in Bath and are now going to be working in Keynsham and don't have their office space anymore, and maybe some more staff satisfaction, looking at retention and recruitment and the impact of the changes to home working on those parameters. I mean, it's quite a big piece of work, but I just wondered whether that's something we might undertake.
Okay, well, if again, we could take that to the agenda planning meeting with Winston, I and the officer support and see, and you can note that, Michaela, yeah? And we can put that in for our discussion on how best to tackle it. Yeah. And if we can note Lucy's connection and Karen's connection to that, then if there's any questions, we could come back. Yeah.
Councillor Warrington wants to speak.
Yeah.
Chair,
Go ahead.
2 points. I think that there's a possibility that the People's Strategy Update report may include some of the people strategy and the preparing for the future, because that may have elements of satisfaction and how they're going to look at that. Because clearly, if they're going to do a big piece of work around people's strategy, they better make sure that people are going to be satisfied with some of the changes. The other issue is I wonder whether we need to have an update on the these council tax empty property charges, because I personally would like to keep an eye on that just to see what happens and how we can help influence that.
Okay. So very good then. So that's another item that can come in, and also perhaps allied to that, we could include a short update on the new council tax contribution scheme, because a lot of people, I assume, will make their decisions in the next couple of months as they start paying their council. And even if it might not be complete, I think it might be interesting to get an early impression of what the take-up has been initially.
Yeah, that would be good.
And this panel did a lot of work on that. And I can't see if anybody's got a hand up, Winston, waiting. Have they? If not, could I add one, which is the property report is due. With our next meeting being towards the end of May, my concern is that that's a long while. And when we discussed it before, we said that the panel would be happy to have an additional meeting slotted in just on that subject when this very, very key and important report is available. So would the panel indicate whether they would support the idea of a meeting to go through that property report?
Yes.
Is there general consent for that idea? Yeah, that's excellent. We'll feed that in, because it seems like we're going to be quite close now to actually being in a position to review that. So Michaela, if you just take the overall list that we've just been through, you've got notes of all that. I don't know whether we need to go anything as formal as a vote, do we? Are people happy that we just explore?
Chair, there's various people waving. Councillor Hodge is waving. Councillor Elliott wanted to speak, and Councillor.
Okay. Well, you were letting me know because I was on video for that. It's on the panel. So I will now just go to MIS and just see. And I apologise to everybody for this, but I'm actually running this off an iPhone because my computer's just broken. So, okay. So I have then got. So who was first, Winston, just to get me on the list? Was
Councillor Elliott was first.
Right. Councillor Elliott, where you go?
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly to, I agree that the preparing for the future stuff needs some scrutiny around it, and I'd like to particularly emphasise some metrics around the three key justifications. I think it's important that we actually see some numbers, and that we can see how those numbers change. Because there are key justifications for that policy, and we need to be able to see, in order to be able to see whether the change has worked or not, we need to be able to compare the metrics. So I think I just wanted to emphasise that. Thank you.
Good point.
Okay, so on that basis, if there's no one left to speak, because Lucy, you've said you don't need to.
Sean
now.
Hughes.
Sean Hughes. Councillor Hughes.
Oh yeah, he's come in. So Sean, the floor's yours.
Sorry, no, I think you already covered it. I say my main concern is this Montague Evans report that should have been available in February. So certainly by the time we meet in May, should definitely be there for us to review. And it's going to take, I'd imagine that's quite a big piece of work to review that report.
And just to respond to you, Sean, that's why I would be looking with Winston and the officers to see whether we can have a dedicated meeting in April, in at the timing, because otherwise we're going to almost have a 2-month wait. And I don't know what people think, but I think given we've had call-ins associated to property and issues, I think it's a key role, and given it was commissioned to address urgent issues, that we actually have a chance to scrutinise that.
Okay, and I think the only other thing I want to mention, that it was mentioned, and I don't know what the timescales are, that there's going to be a consultation on the empty shops. So I'd be interested in looking at that when that's available.
Okay, now that's excellent. So have you got that list then, Michaela, that we can feed into the agenda setting meeting?
Yeah, yes, I have.
And I don't propose to take a vote on that, because I think I'm sensing a general consensus that we'll explore that and come back and report back on all those ideas. Either they'll be on the next agenda or they'll be in the work plan for everybody to see. Okay. So on that basis, I believe we've got all the speakers we've been through. We've finished the work plan. So unless anybody else has something to add to the work plan, I propose to close the meeting. I'd like to thank everybody for coming today and for their inputs, both officers and members of the panel and members of the public watching. And thank you.